Just wanted to do a really, really fast video because I wanted to document as much as I could about what just happened. Um, this is Monday, June the 13th of the year 2022. It is currently 9:38 p.m. Um, here on the East Coast. Um, as many may know or many may find out, I live in Blue Ridge, Virginia, against the mountains on a farm, a fairly large farm. Um, and some really something something news happened. um, about an hour ago, uh, my son came in my bedroom here um, and told me that he needed me out on the back porch, that something was happening in the woods. Um, Let me tell you, everybody that's here with me tonight. There's my son, my daughter, my daughter's soon-to-be um, husband, my soon-to-be son-in-law, my wife, and two friends of my son that are over here tonight with him. But I'm trying to get my fucking thoughts together so I can organize it, because this was amazing. Well, frightening, but amazing at the exact same time. Um, okay, let me tell you what led up to this. Like I said, about an hour ago, um, my son came in the bedroom and asked me if I would come downstairs and go out on the back porch and listen to something that was happening um, in the woods. Now, our farm is butted up against the Blue Ridge Mountains. Actually, the farm extends into the Blue Ridge Mountains quite a bit. My land does, I should say, not the farm itself. My land extends quite a ways up into the mountains there. As people may or may not know, we've had multiple, to put it lightly, multiple Bigfoot encounters here on our property. Um, most of them of the hostile sort. So we've become well known in our community as being the Bigfoot farm. But I'm digressing too much. Wow, guys, this is amazing. What just happened here? Well, it's amazing and terrifying at the same time. um, like I said, about an hour ago, he had me come downstairs. I'd come outside to look, but before he came to get me, I'll tell you what had happened. Uh, they were sitting out in the backyard. We have a fire pit slash barbecue pit dug into the earth out in the yard, and they were cooking various and sundry meats out in the yard before this. And this is before sunset, before the sun went completely down, and they were going to get the food and come inside and eat it. When my my soon-to-be son-in-law, he apparently he had heard something screaming in the woods. It sounded like he said it sounded like a woman screaming, but it went from the sound of a high-pitched woman screaming, he said, and um, ended um, with a quick but guttural roar at the end. So he got everybody's attention, because everybody, of course, is out there drinking and having a good time and not paying any attention. But he was, of course, he's skittish on our farm anyway. He's skittish. He's a city boy. He's not used to being out here in the woods. He thinks everything is out here in nature will kill him and eat him. And as I've explained to him here on our farm, he's more than correct. We have shit that lives in the woods that probably would want to kill you and eat you. So he's always skittish. He always swears he hears shit in the woods all the time when he's here. And, sometimes I take advantage of that and I'll tell him a story just to scare the fart out of him. But he heard it. It was in the distance and he barely heard it and he stopped. Because, like I said, when here on the farm, he's my family and our farmhands. They're used to most natural sounds, that the woods make and the wildlife makes, and um, they're not overly attuned unless something comes up in their face and surprises them. They don't pay quick attention to stuff. They consider it just background noise for the most part. Oh, sorry, gotta pull my blankie up. But he heard that wailing roar in the distance, and he grabbed my daughter, his soon-to-be wife, and he took her past a little circle, everybody out there cooking around the pit, and he made her listen, and she could start to hear it. Apparently, it was getting closer and closer in the woods, closer to the farm, through the woods, and she ran and got my her brother, my son, and brought him over, and hey, Bigfoot Anon, good to see you. This is a strictly spontaneous show that's happening right now because some shit just happened here on the farm. You might find interesting. I strongly advise you to listen to the beginning to catch most of it, but for anybody who tunes in tonight or comes onto the live until I'm done, this is not going to last long. It's going to last long enough for me to finish the story, and then I'm going to get off. Because, again, this just happened here on the farm. And I don't know if it's Bigfoot related or not, but I'll tell you in a second what I think it is, what's going on out here in the woods right now. And they finally stopped, all of them finally stopped talking, and they all, stepped outside the crackling of the fire so they could hear that sound. And they said it sounded like it was getting closer and closer and louder in the woods. And they can see off in the distance as the hillside slopes up going towards the mountains across the creek. You can see it from our backyard. Way out towards the fields. You can see it going towards the mountains. We have a beautiful view out there. And the wind was not blowing tonight either. We have no wind blowing tonight. The air is strangely still tonight. But it is incredibly hot and humid outside right now. For those who don't know, Virginia weather especially, it's incredibly hot and humid right now. Even now with the sun going down, the sun has gone down. It's still incredibly hot and humid. And it was getting closer and closer to the house, and they were all apparently getting quite scared by it. Apparently my daughter looked at my son and said, "Go get dad. This is some dad level shit. He needs to come out here and hear this." So he flashed forward to about a little over an hour ago. My son came upstairs and got me dressed and took me downstairs. As we were going down the stairs, I looked at him and says, "Okay." He was pale. He was pale as hell. I could tell something has scared the shit out of him out here. And he's my son, so he doesn't scare really easy. He knows to be afraid when there's a need to be afraid. But this, I've never, seen him pale like this before. And he was scared. He was scared. He looked at me and says, "Dad, you need to come out here and see this. Something is happening in the woods." And first thing out of my mouth I said, "Is it those hairy assholes again in the woods?" I said, are they out now this early in the evening? Are they already out? Then I asked him, are they getting the livestock? Are they catching any of the goats again, any of the chickens? He looked at me and says, Dad, I don't think it's them. I don't think it's those hairy assholes. I think it's something else out here in the woods. So he took me to the porch, and um, I, when I opened up the door, we have a partially enclosed back porch. I opened up the screen door and I stepped out and onto the steps leading down off the porch. And I heard it in the woods. It's exactly as he described it to me. It was a high pitched, it sounded like a high pitched woman's scream that trailed off into this guttural um, roar towards the end. It's the first time we've ever heard this. It was one of the first times I've ever heard this sound in all of my travels and all of my various experiences with the strange and weird shit across the country and some other across the United States and across a couple of other countries. It's the first time I've ever heard any of this stuff happen out here before. And it sounded like it was right behind our furthest barn, which is an old tobacco barn, which is at the very end of the working part of the farm and the property, leading past the fence past the barbed wire fence that leads directly into the forest. That is part of our property that leads back into the mountains. It sounded like it was behind um, that tobacco barn, screaming its full head off. And I have to say, um, it scared me. Uh, I got my son to help me get off the porch. I'm not terribly mobile right now, so I'm gonna have to admit that I'm rather feeble as far as walking. I didn't have my cane with me, so I got him to support me. I told him to take me past the chicken coops and get me closer to the barns, to where all of our barns are located at, including that tobacco barn. He stopped and looked at me like had lost my fucking mind. He said, "Do you know what it is, Dad? What is that?" And I looked at him, and it's probably one of the few times I actually something I said scared my son. Um, I looked at my son and I told him, um, I have absolutely no idea what that is. It's new to me. And I could feel his hand tighten on my shoulder. It scared him. What I said scared him. Um, his hand did, of course, tightened on my shoulder. And he said, "Are you sure you want to walk across the yard and get closer to that barn?" Um, and I looked at him, of course, and smiled and went, "Why wouldn't I?" But before he took me, I looked at my son's friends and my daughter and her fiance. I looked at all of them and I said, "You get in the house." I said, "All of y'all just get in the house. Take whatever you want with you, but get inside the house and shut the door." Um, my son-in-law tried to be brave for a second. I gotta give him that. Give him credit. He tried to be brave for 5 minutes. He looked at me and he says, "I'm coming with you." Um, and I looked at him, yeah, with a big smile on my face, of course. Not trying to be insulting with what I was about to say. Um, and I told him, I said, "Look, I don't know what the fuck this is, okay?" And the whole time, whatever this was that was behind in the woods was still screaming its full fucking head off. Um, I don't know why I didn't think to record it, or that some of the jackasses out there with their phones, because everybody here tonight had their fucking phone with them. Everybody had their phone with them. But when this started up, I think it scared people so badly that it startled them so badly that they didn't think about taking their fucking phone out and recording this. Hell, fuck, I didn't think about it until after I came back in the house. Um, so I'm a little pissed off about that, at myself, that I should have known better. I can understand the young people. Well, then again, I can't, because most young people have to fucking record everything and put it on Snapchat and fucking TikTok. So I can't believe it. Nobody decided to do that tonight. Because before they all left, I asked them, I said, did anybody fucking record this? And of course, nobody did. They were genuinely frightened, though. They were scared shitless. Whatever this was in the woods screaming. Okay. I know I'm all over the place, but I'm both excited and a little scared at the same time right now as I tell the story. It scared me. That sound scared me. There, I admitted it. It scared me. I haven't heard anything. I've never heard anything like that before. Ever. I haven't heard of anything like that in, the various bits and pieces of lore that I've read and studied about various paranormal predators that exist out here. And cryptids and cryptid predators that exist out there. But like I said, I got my son as we were walking across the yard. I asked him to guide me by my herb garden. Now, this is not a garden for. This is not your typical garden that has rosemary and basil and everything else. Now we have a garden like that. My herb garden is filled with various herbs and spices that are used in various ritual practices. But there was one herb in particular, that I wanted to pick to take with me to act as a sort of protection. And, it was two herbs I ended up picking. It was a sprig of rue, which is rue graveolens. Stinks like ass if you've never smelled it before. It just absolutely reeks. Sometimes in a good way, but when I broke it off, it just hit me wrong. It stunk like hell. And the other thing was a piece of yellow hellebore. And those who raise flowers and plants know that hellebore, also known as the Lenten roses, is frequently planted in gardens, but yellow hellebore is mostly used in old customs and burial rituals, and it's buried in cemetery. It is grown to keep cemeteries from going bad, from keeping evil from consuming a cemetery. And rue is also used to both ward off evil and repel the unnatural. It's also used to keep the dead in its grave if it's planted on the grave of someone that you may suspect may be troublesome and may rise back out of the grave. Is to plant rue on their grave to keep them in their grave. So I picked a sprig of both and kept it in my left hand. My son didn't say a word. My son has a fair bit of knowledge when it comes to herbs, and using herbs, and like I said, and various and sundry rituals. And I didn't want to go out there completely unarmed, so to speak. I had noticed that my son was wearing one of his guns that he had, but he hadn't drawn it. He was wearing his .45 at his hip, but he didn't draw it. Because I raised him right when it came to guns. You never draw a gun unless you're going to use it. And he didn't pull it out, which I have to applaud him for. Like I said, my children are very literate when it comes to when it comes to guns and gun safety. I raised them not to be afraid of them and to use them responsibly and safely. We were about 2/3 of the way um, to the edge of the yard before the trail that would lead back to the tobacco barn where the screaming was happening at, and was still happening at. Um, it was so loud that you could feel it vibrate against your skin when the growl happened at the end. Um, Almost like a subsonic feel across your skin. Um, it's like having your hand against a drum while it's being beat. That's how the vibrations felt going across my skin. Um, Once that piercing woman's scream ended in that growl. Except we started going down the trail, and I was in my left hand, of course, with those two herbs, and I was crushing them as we were going down the trail in my hand and blending them in my hand to release their scent and to release their potency into the air. Root work and herbalist lore and herbal work as a charm. Usually by themselves they don't work unless, of course, you release them and blend them to your skin and add them to your own. Have their energy blend with your energy by crushing them in your hand, like I was doing with my hand, and you know, seeking their protection, their protective energies to reinforce my own spiritual aura about me. We were open the gate. We were getting ready to go on the trail and head back to that old tobacco barn at the edge of the property. And the whole time my son kept whispering, "Dad, are you sure? Dad, are you sure?" And I kept saying, "It's okay, son. It's okay. It's not. I don't think it's going to hurt us. I don't think it's going to hurt us." That's why I kept saying, "I don't think it's going to hurt us." Now you have to remember, for those who know, this tobacco barn, the apple tree, which is we now know as the property line, so to speak, between my property and their territory, the hairy bastards' territory to live in the woods, is further down the property past this old tobacco barn, um, near one of our orchards. So and it was so early in the evening, and usually we don't get visited by those hairy arseholes in the mountain. Um, until much, much later in the evening, closer to midnight or 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. They usually don't um, make an appearance unless they're being overtly aggressive. Then it usually happens around 10 or 11 o'clock at night, before midnight, when they come closer to the house, when they want to try to frighten you. But like I said, the sun was going down pretty rapidly. It was still light outside, enough to see without a flashlight. Um, but you have to remember where we live at here against the mountains and in the mountains here, that when the sun begins to set, it gets dark. Very, very dark. The darkness is almost palpable when you go out. The darkness presses against you in the woods. You can't see shit. And a beam from a flashlight does not go very far in the woods. Trust me. We were getting closer to the barn, and the screaming was becoming less frequent. It was still happening, but it was becoming less frequent. And my son finally looked at me and says, "Dad, do you think it knows we're here?" And I whispered very quietly to him, I said, I think it does know we're here. I think it does know we're here. Um, and about that time, I got goosebumps now thinking about this part. Yeah, fucking goosebumps from this because it's scared. It's scared to again. This was frightening, utterly frightening. Coming from me, that's something. This was utterly frightening. The screaming finally stopped. It was a. Everybody knows that a group of crows is called a murder of crows. I almost called them a flock of crows. But when at the point where the screaming stopped and did not start back up, that's when we stopped, held our place. We didn't go any further. That's when the screaming stopped. And this very large murder of crows, it had to have been 30 or 40 crows. Um, flew up from behind the tobacco barn. Now, so we were still a little ways from the tobacco barn. They flew up out of the woods behind the tobacco barn, straight up into the air. Um, I have never heard crows make the sounds that they made. They were so loud and, you know, cacophonous. Um, Usually, to me, crows sound beautiful when they make their little cacaw sound, and when you have a group of them chattering together like that. But it sounded like they were all chattering with different voices and at different tenors at the same time. Um, it was so dissonant and so cacophonous and unnerving. And they circled the barn, over top of the barn in the air above it, several times. Then they flew back towards the mountains, very quickly. This 30 or 40 crows flew straight back to the mountains. Um, Again, they came out from behind the barn in the woods, so I don't know if they were roosting back there or what, but there was something back there apparently that startled them and made them move. And then that's when we heard a different sound. It was the sound of it started off sounding like an old man laughing. Um, you could just barely hear it. Again, the wind wasn't blowing at all. This has been a strange evening for the weather. It was hot, and super humid. And it sounded like an old man laughing. And then it switched into the sound of a small child laughing. And it came out from behind the barn in the woods where the screaming was. And the sound of the little boy laughing, um, it sounded like whatever was laughing was moving away back deeper into the woods. It started off loud and it began to fade. And we could hear, it sounded like limbs breaking behind the barn. Um, as something was laughing. It sounded like, again, like a little boy laughing. It started off sounding like an old man laughing. And it descended into the sound of a little boy laughing. And running, and something was running through the woods back towards the mountains, laughing, sounding like a little boy. And my son whispered to me, says, "Dad, do you want to go back there? Do you want to go any further?" At this point, I had crushed those two herbs to a pulp in my hand, scared shitless of what was going on. And I didn't answer him right away. And he says, "Dad, what is that? What was that? And I said, I want to go back to the house. I want to go back to the house now. Because I got this uneasy feeling that whatever ran into the woods laughing like a little boy had stopped. And it felt like something was back in those woods staring at me. It was a horrendous feeling. And it wasn't like when, I've described where I felt like I was being watched by something like these Bigfoot-like things that live in our mountains. This was something different. This felt like something very old, very dangerous. Now, I don't use this word very often, but I do believe in the power of this word. And but like I said, it felt like something very old, very dangerous, and very evil that had found its way down our mountainside and found our house. Now, he brought me back upstairs. Of course, everybody in the house is asking me, Dad, what was it? Dad, what was it? Mr. Coleman, what was it? Mr. Coleman, what was in the woods? Did you see what it was? And I looked at my son. I said, take me to my room. And you can explain to them what we saw, but take me back to my room, which is what I'm in right now, is my room. Before he brought me in here, though, I stopped by my little library that I have, and I pulled out a couple of my books, because the entire time we were walking back to the house, it felt like something was walking behind us the entire time back to the house, like something was pacing us as we were walking back to the house. I've started going through my books and through my journals and see if my memory has been failing me. So to see if I had encountered anything like this, or if anybody that I had talked to had told me stories about it, because I've collected many, many stories from people that have had encounters with other cryptids and preternatural and supernatural and paranormal things that exist in our world that I personally have not encountered. I had always hoped to encounter them because I'm that crazy. And I'm probably going to spend another couple hours tonight. I haven't found anything of what it is yet. I've narrowed it down to several things, but I'm not ready to name them yet. Because to name something is to give something power, and I'm not ready to name it yet until I'm sure of what it was that we encountered tonight. That came out of the woods screaming tonight. Came out of the woods screaming and went back into the woods laughing. I will say this. It reminded me of something my great granny had told me about she said lived in our woods. She said a great many remember I grew up in the mountains, Blue Ridge Mountains. I grew up in the mountains, deep in on top of a fucking mountain. And that was civilization to me. And being the old crazy witch lady that she was, and I say crazy out of love, she shared a lot of the lore of the mountains with me about some of the scarier things that lived in our mountains that could hurt you. And one of them is something that I had never encountered while she was alive, or encountered after that. But she would always tell me the stories of this thing called a Krata. She said Kratas always pretended to be something they weren't, to lure you into the woods. And when she said they would pretend to be something they weren't, of course, I had to ask what she meant by that. And she said that they could imitate other people and other sounds. Heavy Metal Beer Club, welcome to the show, dude. You've got to watch this from the beginning, dude. I think you might appreciate this. This was a spur of the for everybody who's on tonight, or for the ones who'll watch it later. This was a spur of the moment. This is me telling you every shit that has happened this afternoon in the last few hours here on my farm. But the way she described a Karada was that they always pretended it to be something they weren't. That they would always mimicked human voices to lure you into the woods, deeper into the woods, where they would eat you. And if you ever saw a Krata, it was a pale gray, she described it, creature with big yellow eyes, large yellow eyes, something like a pig's snout that had a mouth full of fangs and had claws, of course, and pointed ears, but its entire body was gray. And it walked hunched over. It was very thin. Its head was much bigger than its body, and you could count the vertebra and the Krata's back, she said. They were always skinny. They were always searching for food in the woods. But much like at the time, now much later I learned that what she was describing to me sounded what was a lot like a Wendigo. But I think that this thing was maybe the Krata might be a distant relative to the Wendigo, because she said it was a spiritual creature it was a spiritual creature of hunger that manifested itself physically when it was hunting, and again would mimic the sounds of people to lure them into the woods until, you got lost. You were alone. But it liked eating people that were afraid. That she said when you were afraid, it brought glee to it, to know that you were afraid as it ate you. She said, and that's what makes that thing nothing but pure evil. So for now, that's the best thing I can guess to what it was, is what she described as a Krata. There's a lot more to what a Krata is, but I just had to break it down quickly for you guys tonight. But I'm going to be pouring over my books tonight. Now, I do have 2 lives scheduled tonight, which I intend on keeping and being able to do, because I feel better this week to be able to do them than I did last week. So I will, during one of those lives, I'll do an update to what I find out tonight. If anything else happens tonight, or if anything else happens tomorrow night, or throughout the day tomorrow, I'm going to go out of my way to try to record it and be ready to record it. I haven't been this scared in a long time, guys. I really haven't. There's something new on the Naked Bigfoot's farm. And it's fucking evil, whatever the fuck it is. It's just fucking evil. That's just the feeling I got from it, coming out of the woods. Okay, guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this tonight. If you have any ideas about maybe what you might think it is, feel free to contact me through Twitter or through the comments here. I am more than happy to entertain any ideas that anybody may have. Have a good night, guys. Have a good night.